Welcome everybody to this evening's webinar. We're going to talk about frequently asked questions. These are not necessarily all the questions that I get, but these are the most common questions that myself or any of the other DAC representatives get. Of course, if you have other questions, please feel free to ask them at the end. If you're watching this video later, make sure that you get in touch with your DAC representative or myself, and you can ask these questions or go on our YouTube or Facebook page. So where I always want to start, because probably one of the most common questions that I get is, can I do conversions? And any of you that know me know that I hate doing can I do comparisons? And I hate doing comparisons because my mantra is sell what you've got and forget about the rest, right? Know your products inside and out, know exactly what they do, what they don't do, where they fit, where they don't fit. And that is going to make your job a whole lot easier than trying to focus on what they're not and what everybody else has, okay? But if you are looking at a comparison, some of these values are useful because what we do, and if you're comparing between NASC accredited products, then it's going to be a lot easier because NASC requires you to set up your labels in a certain way. But if they don't carry that NASC, National Animal Supplement Council logo, then it seems like people want to tend to write their labels however they want, or in worst case scenario, don't even put a label on their particular product. Now, don't ever touch that with a 10-foot pole. But if you're trying to do comparisons, these are some things that you need to know. You need to know that there's 16 ounces in a pound, and some of these sound so simple, like why doesn't everybody know that? But we tend to forget them when we're looking at trying to compare from one unit to another. ppm stands for parts per million, but it also is exactly the same as milligrams per kilogram. So if you see ppm, it's exactly the same as if you saw milligrams per kilogram. And you're like, well, I'm not British or Australian, so what do I know about kilograms? Kilograms, there's 2.2 pounds in a kilogram. So if you take milligrams per kilogram and you divide it by 2.2, now you have milligrams per pound. Well, we don't feed our products in pounds. Maybe if we were looking at a horse feed, that would be useful, but we have supplements and we're feeding in the ounces. So now we get back to the first bullet point. How many ounces are in a pound? 16. So we take that number, that milligrams per pound, and we divide it by 16, and now we have milligrams per ounce. So we just went from ppms to milligrams per ounce in a split second, and that is going to make it a whole lot easier for you to work out what's in your product, what's in the serving size you're feeding, because remember, we don't feed kilograms. So if somebody lists there's 50 ppms or milligrams per kilogram, and we're listing it as milligrams per ounce, and our number looks a whole lot less, well, that's because nobody feeds in kilograms. You've got to work out how much is your horse actually getting. The next one that's really, really important to remember is percentage. Percentage is always applied to an amount. Oftentimes, people call me and they say, well, it says as, let's say, use selenium, for example, 5% selenium. How much is in the bag? Well, 5% of that bag is selenium. 5% of your 1 ounce scoop, 5% of 15 ounces, 5% of whatever the unit of measure you are looking at is selenium. That's where it becomes important for you to then do that calculation. And for me, I am terrible at math, so I always use Google because I have fat fingers and I'm always typing in the wrong thing. So I literally will write into Google 5% of, let's say I want to know what 5% of 1 ounce is. 1 ounce. And what units do I want it in? Usually I want it in milligrams. So I'll write 5% of 1 ounce in milligrams. And Google will give you exactly that. So that's a good one to remember, that the percentage is always applied to an amount. Important to always remember that amount when applying that percentage. So 100% of 10 is 10, right? All of 10 is 10. 10% of 100 is also 10. 1% of 1,000 is also 10. And 0.1% of 10,000 is also 10. So if you needed to feed your horse 10, whatever, parts of whatever it is, you can find a product that is 100% that, 10% that, 1% or 0.1% that, and you're going to get 10 units. So make sure when you're looking at percentage, you're applying it to an actual value. Otherwise, percentage means nothing. One of the questions that we get a lot, I've seen it a little less on the DAC Facebook page as of late, but I still get this question getting emailed in to the info@dac.com, is about the DAC oil, and mainly because we're trying to compare oils and what's in yours and compared to what I'm feeding now. How many calories are in the DAC oil? And it's 4.2 megacals per pound. Put that in perspective, that's 4 times the amount of calories that are in oats or barley, and about 3.5 times the amount of calories that are in corn, for example. So it's very, very calorie dense. What is the omega-3 to 6 ratio in the DAC oil? There's 1 part omega-3 to 2.4 parts of omega-6. What is in the DAC oil? Now, I'm not going to give you exactly how much canola oil, how much flaxseed oil, how much wheat germ oil or fish oil or rice oil, because I would be giving away my formula. That is a proprietary blend. But if you look at the ingredients list, AFCO and the FDA require a correct label. I can guarantee you that the DAC labels are correct. They require you to list the ingredients in order of inclusion. So the largest quantity of oil in the DAC oil is canola oil, followed by flaxseed oil, followed by wheat germ, rice oil, vitamin E. Then we use a small amount of citric acid, which is what? Vitamin C, and some caramel flavor. And they're included, the quantity of each of those is in that order: canola, flax, wheat germ, etc. So don't ask me how much of each of those is in there, because I can't tell you, which really is the answer to my next question: how much flaxseed oil is in the DAC oil? I'm not telling you. It's a proprietary blend. Is there soy in the DAC oil? Well, if you read the ingredients list and you don't see soy, then no, there's no soy in the DAC oil. There used to be, a long time ago, there was corn oil and soy oil, but we made the switch to a canola oil base because it had a much better omega-3 to 6 fatty acid ratio. So when I say better, I mean there were less omega-6s and slightly more omega-3s in the canola oil as compared to soybean oil and corn oil. How much canola oil is in the DAC oil? Again, I can't tell you, but just know that we've listed the ingredients in order of their inclusion rate. People will sometimes ask, well, why don't you list magnesium? Or this is one I get all the time. How much potassium is in the DAC oil? None. How much phosphorus? None. Calcium? None. It's 99.5% fat. That 0.5% is what we call ash. It's just minor impurities. There's 4,000 IUs of natural vitamin E per pound. A pound is about a little over 2 cups. When we look at the actual quantities of omega-3, the actual percentage, 8% omega-3s, 19% omega-6s, 61% omega-9s. But I'm not going to list omega-9s. I'm not going to talk about omega-9s when I'm talking about marketing materials or in webinars, because omega-9 fatty acids are not essential to the horse, which means The horse can make omega-9s in their own body. They don't need to consume them, unlike omega-3s and 6s, which are essential. They need to consume those in their diet. How much calories or energy? It's 4.2 megacals per pound. So this one is always, this is a really good way of describing the Dac oil to a customer. And if you've got somebody who's like on the fence about whether they want to add oil to the diet, this oil, even if you're doing a little, seminar or something for some 4-H's or for some kids or a local riding group, or you're at a show and you just want to set up more of a hands-on demonstration, get a little kitchen scale or even just get a little measuring cup and measure out 3.5 ounces of Dac oil. Then beside it, put a pound of alfalfa. I don't care whether it's alfalfa pellets, cubes, or long stem hay. 3.5 ounces of Dac oil will give you the same calorie content, the amount of energy, as a pound of alfalfa. 4.5 ounces of oil will give you the same amount of calories or energy that's in a pound of beet pulp. 5.5 ounces of oil is the same calories as a pound of oats. 7.5 ounces of oil is the same as a pound of Dac Bloom. So when people say, oh, and I have gone on, I've been, tagged to answer questions on the Authorized Dealer Facebook page, what do I feed my horse to put weight on him? 100%, the first thing you feed is the Dac oil. Well, really the first thing you look at is digestive health and is he getting enough hay and has he been dewormed and does he have good teeth? But when we've sorted all that out, the Dac oil is the most calorie dense and it's the easiest thing to get him to eat because he doesn't feel like he's eating a lot of bulk. Most horses are thin because they don't want to eat. So if I try to get him to eat a extra pound of beet pulp, that's dry beet pulp, and then you're going to wet it, versus 4.5 ounces of oil, it's so much easier to get him to eat 4.5 ounces of oil. Now, it's not to say that there's not other cool benefits to alfalfa and beet pulp and oats and bloom, but when we're just purely talking about calories, and that's how it plays out. Feed 2 cups of oil, which works out to be actually over a pound and a half, of Dac oil per day for significant weight gain. Now we're talking about 40 to 100 pounds of weight gain over about a 60-day or 2-month period. So if you call me and say the Dac oil isn't working, or my client says the Dac oil isn't working, the first question you ask is, how much are you feeding? If they're doing 1 to 2 pumps a day, 1 pump is 1 ounce, right? If we want significant weight gain, we're talking about 23 ounces a day for 60 days. And you're not going to just throw that in the feed tomorrow. You're going to gradually introduce that, build them up, but that's what it's going to take. Here's another one that I get asked a lot. What kind of grain does Dac recommend? We always maintain that we don't really recommend any brand of grain. Now, you know that if you've worked with me in certain areas of the country, and I also work with a feed company in that area, I can recommend products that will complement the Dac products well. But our Dac supplements will actually work with any brand of feed that you choose. Now, depending on the quality of the product that you choose, you may have to feed more or less of the Dac supplements. I've seen some local mill mix grain products that don't really have a lot of vitamins and minerals in them. You're going to have to feed the upper end of the feeding rate of something like the Dac Orange, versus if you were feeding it with a commercial grain, then you might have to only feed the lower end of the Dac Orange, for example. But we don't really recommend any particular grain. what is the shelf life of my DAC products? And this is if you have kept them under correct storage conditions. So it hasn't been in a flood, it hasn't had mice in it, it hasn't been in scorching or freezing temperatures. You don't live in, a swamp in Louisiana where it's super humid all the time. So if we have reasonable conditions where it's out of the light, it's maintained in normal temperature, that's not varying swings, then 18 to 24 months. After the 18-month shelf life, you might start to lose some of your vitamin content, but it's not like any of the products will go rancid and cause your horse to be sick. You're just going to lose some of the viability. How should I store my DAC products? What are under correct storage conditions? Out of direct sunlight, keep in sealed containers. The new zipper bags actually allow you to really squeeze out more of the air because air contact to the product is what will start to break it down. Avoid the extreme heat and cold. Ideally, keep it between 50 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Avoid damp, humid conditions, ideally between 40 to 50% humidity. Things like electrolytes, for example, and even the Optimum Flex, they're what we call hydroscopic, which means they suck water in. So if you do, maybe you don't use a lot of electrolyte and you opened a tub and then you didn't use it for a while and you've opened it or you're just not using it very frequently but you live in a pretty humid climate and then you go to use it and it's like, why is it all lumpy all of a sudden? That is because it is absorbing water. Now you can do things like, when you get like jerky or some other kind of perishable products and they'll have that little silica sac thing, that little sac in the bottom, and they say don't eat it. You can actually put those in to stop that. You can put a little sack of rice that will help to absorb any moisture. But what I recommend, if you're buying large quantities of product, because that's the cheapest way to do it, but you don't have a bunch of horses and you don't go through it super quickly, just decant out some out of your bigger tub or your bigger bag into a smaller tub that you're going to open every day, but that's going to get used up pretty quickly. Don't open your massive big container and open it every day and it's constant. Now it takes me 18 months to use it and every day I'm opening it. And you want to also make sure it's free from rodent and insect contamination. Now, there are a couple of our products like the DAC metabolic, even the cool gut at times, the ingredients are a little bit more sensitive to heat. The DHA Perform is another one. So if you live in hot, humid conditions, I definitely recommend you keep those products perhaps in your basement where it's cooler, and then you just decant out maybe a week or two's worth and you use that at the barn, and then you keep refilling your smaller container. Y, that should say Y. Y is X, not guaranteed on the guaranteed analysis. Well, there are rules set by the Association of American Feed Control Officers, and we abbreviate that to AFCO, and they set what we're allowed to write on the feed tag. So there's a list of things that must always be listed for certain products. Let's just say, I don't know, the Dac Oil, for example. On Dac Oil, we have to list, I'm getting out my catalog so that I can get this right. Here is it, here we go. So we have to list crude fat in the minimum, total free fatty acids, unsaponifiable matter, which again, that's really nothing, but it has to be listed, insoluble impurities, moisture, we also always have to list moisture, and then whatever else is key to that product. Vitamin E is key to the DAC oil because there's 4,000 IUs per pound. Biotin is not an element of the Dac oil. It's not I'm not selling the Dac oil based on its biotin content. So I'm not going to list biotin. Breeders Excel, that's a different label. The Total Performance and the Total Performance Plus, I do list the biotin on the Total Performance Plus, but I don't list it on the Total Performance. And the reason is it's just not a key element of that product. Biotin is not essential. Why? Because the bacteria in the hindgut of the horse make biotin. So if you keep your horse's gut healthy, they'll make biotin. Now we know that there are times where additional biotin can be useful. So for example, on the foundation formula, the first thing I've listed is biotin because it is the key element to that product. Also, in order for biotin to be fed in a quantity that actually does anything to your horse, it has to be fed at 20 milligrams per serving. So in the foundation formula, 1 ounce will give you 20 milligrams. Anything under that, and it's pretty pointless. So in something like the Total Performance, the biotin is 2 milligrams. So it's not a key element to that product. Oh, I get this one a lot, and they've developed this really cool scoop size chart, which still confuses people sometimes. But anyway, why are there different scoops? Well, if you look on any of the labels, they're all the serving size for any of the non-liquid products is all per ounce, right? So I'm feeding 1 ounce, I'm feeding 3 ounces. Well, think about feathers versus rocks. Rocks are very heavy. Feathers are very light. So if I wanted a pound of feathers, wow, the container is going to have to be huge. But a pound of rocks, it might fit in a pint of ice cream. It might fit, the pound of rocks might fit in that. It might even, if it's a heavy enough rock, it might fit in a butter container. But a pound of feathers is going to be a much, much bigger container. And it's exactly the same with the Dac products. They don't all weigh the same, right? Some of them are heavier than others, but I'm not feeding horses based on volume. I'm feeding them based on weight, right? I'm not telling you to feed a fluid ounce. This is a weight ounce. So that's why something like the DHA Perform. Anyone who's seen that product, it almost looks like fish food. It's very fluffy, it's very light. So in order to get an ounce of DHA Perform, the scoop is huge because it's not very dense and it's not very heavy. The Orange Superior, the Colt Grower, the Optimum Flex Plus, the Total Performance Plus, and the Electroaid are heavier. They've got heavier ingredients in them. So an ounce of Optimum Flex Plus fits in a much smaller scoop. So that's why we have different sized scoops. I always find this very interesting, and disregard kilograms because we know that there are 2.2 pounds to every kilogram. So we're looking at about a hair under 5 pounds, 4.67 pounds. All of these weigh the same. So, and lucerne is alfalfa. That's what we call it in Australia. We call it lucerne. But that big pile of alfalfa on the end, that weighs 4.6 pounds. That squished pile of alfalfa also weighs 4.6 pounds. That little tub of alfalfa cubes also weighs 4.6 pounds. And that big silver bucket of chopped alfalfa, we call it chaff in Australia, is also 4.6 pounds. So you can see why we feed based on weight and not by volume. Because if you thought, oh, look at how much of this kind of standard alfalfa hay, how much space it's taking up in the feed bin, I'm going to fill that much space with alfalfa cubes because my horse can't eat hay anymore. He's going to get 3 or 4 times the weight of alfalfa cubes that he should be getting. So that's why feeding by weight is so absolutely critical. Why so many products and not just 1 or 2 that do more things? When Dr. Duran and myself first started with Dac, when Randy took over, there were some products in the catalog that had just kind of been combined, and they did a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but you've always got to be skeptical of products that claim to do everything, because really in 1 to 2 ounces you run out of physical room to put the quantity of each active ingredient that is going to be enough to actually do anything in 1 to 2 ounces. So there are very few of our products that are claimed to do multiple things. One of them, for example, is the Total Performance Plus. It's a vitamin and mineral supplement, plus it's got, at the higher feeding rate, a maintenance dose of Optimum Flex Plus. Can I feed multiple Dac products at once? Yes, with the exception of the vitamin and mineral supplements. So the Direct Action, the Orange Superior, the Breeder's Choice Plus, the Colt Grower, the Racing Formula, the Total Performance Plus, the Total Performance Plus, and yes, the Pasture Lick should only be fed one of these. Only pick one. If you have the pasture lick out in the field for your horses, and then once a week you bring them in and you think, oh, I should give them some Colt Grower today or some Racing Formula, that's a bad idea. Don't do that. Or, oh, I feed them Total Performance in the stall every night with their oats and alfalfa, but I'm going to put a pasture lick out in the field as well. No, feed one or the other. And you're also, same thing, I'm feeding my mare's Orange Superior, but she's going to have a baby soon, so I'm going to add Colt Grower to that as well, and maybe some Breeder's Choice Plus. No, pick one and stick with it. Now, if you want to add the Bloom and the Oil and the DHA Perform, you can add any of those to any one of these. Will it test? Okay, the Dac Herbal Respond contains Devil's Claw, which is on the USEF and FEI banned substance list. So that will test. If you're looking for a pain mediation alternative, try the DHA Perform, the Dac Yucca. All Dac products are safe to feed prior to and during competition, with the exception of the Dac Herbal Respond. Is it safe for my pregnant mare? I always get, can I feed the Cool Gut to my mare? Can I feed the E-Boost to my pregnant mare? Yes, all the Dac products are safe to feed during pregnancy, except the Dac Herbal Respond and the Dac Mare Relieve. And the reason why Devil's Claw and Dong Quai are not safe for pregnant mares. But I have that listed in the catalog too. The other thing is, don't feed any of the Dac products. Well, I shouldn't say any of them. There are a couple you can, but don't feed them to sheep. If there's copper in it, don't feed it to sheep. So if you go through the catalog, pretty much every product that is going to have copper in it, it says do not feed the sheep. So how long until I see results? This is a funny one. Somebody sent me a message today saying, I fed the foundation formula for 2 days and my horse's shoes fell off. I want my money back. The foundation formula actually takes the longest to see results. 6 to 12 months is the length of time for the hoof to grow out, and it's going to take time. The Combi paste, 30 minutes to an hour. Make sure you feed it prior to the stressful event. If your horse is already going bonkers and you try to feed it the Combi paste, it's not going to do anything. The pre-buff, 30 minutes to an hour. The Dac Breeders Excel. Now, this is not the vitamin and mineral supplement. This is the one that's going to help with semen quality or ovarian function 60 days prior to the first intended date of breeding. All other DAC products typically within 30 days from the start of the full serving of that supplement per day. Not, oh, well, I slowly introduce them. I give them a quarter of it, a half of it, because maybe they didn't like the taste of it. Once you're feeding the full serving, and usually about 30 days, things like the DAC Digestive Feed Additive, the Rescue Aid Paste, they're going to be shorter. Like the Rescue Aid Paste, I recommend people do, if you're trying to do my kind of therapeutic protocol, it's 1 tube a day for 14 days. How long will the DAC Combi stay active in my horse? Depends on the horse and the metabolism and the stress level they're under. It's just like people drinking coffee. It's the opposite end of the spectrum, but some people will drink 1 cup of coffee and that caffeine will last them all day, and others, it lasts them 5 minutes and they're onto another coffee. So my horse is fat and I don't need grain or supplements. Gosh, okay. Well, there are not many overweight people that are also really healthy. So when you just look at body fat coverage, it is not an indicator of nutritional status or overall health. All it means is they've been eating enough calories. All horses have vitamin and mineral requirements that cannot be met by pasture or hay alone. Selenium, copper, and zinc are all deficient in the soils, and therefore they're deficient in the forages. So if you're feeding an alfalfa and oat-based diet and you're not adding a vitamin and mineral supplement, I guarantee you your horse is deficient in selenium, copper, and zinc. What is the omega-3 to 6 ratio in the DAC E Natural? Now, I can say I've only had this a couple of times, but none. There's no omega-3s in the DAC E Natural. The DAC E Natural is pure vitamin E, natural vitamin E. Is there a difference between rice oil and rice bran oil? The Dac Oil ingredients list states rice oil. No, they're the same thing. It was just a kind of AFCO determination. You could write one or the other. We wrote rice oil. I know that we have a lot of folks that have horses with HYPP and they're concerned about the supplements and what can I feed them and how much potassium are they going to get. So for those aren't that familiar with horses with HYPP, hyperkalemic periodic paralysis, ultimately it means they can't have high amounts of potassium in the diet, because they'll get muscle twitching and they'll have seizures, and it's really not that good. But when I talk about their total diet, we don't want to have more than, say, 1.1 to 1.2% of their total diet coming from potassium. So you can see here, when you look at the electroaid paste, the electroaid powder, alfalfa, grass, hay, oats, this is where we go back to percentages, and they're meaningless unless you attach them to an actual value. So if all we do is we look at the actual quantity of potassium that's in the product and we make our determination based on that. Well, I'll look at the top line here where it says DAC electroaid paste. It's 7.5% potassium. The powder is 11% potassium. Alfalfa hay is 2.5% potassium, grass hay 1.8, and oats is 0.5% potassium. Okay, wow. Well, I should feed a lot of oats and I shouldn't feed anything else if I just want to keep the potassium down. But it doesn't work that way. You have to work out how much actual potassium are you getting from the quantity that I need to feed. So the electroaid powder, you're going to feed anywhere from 1 to 4 ounces a day. So that is going to give you anywhere from 3 to 12 grams of potassium per day. Okay, so the oats that were only 0.5% potassium, we're not feeding 1 ounce of oats a day. That's a complete waste of time. We're not even feeding 4 ounces of oats. We're probably going to feed anywhere from 2 to 6 pounds of oats a day, which works out to be 4 to 13 grams of potassium. So we're right in the same realm, a product that was 0.5% potassium, but we had to feed it in much higher quantities, as we're getting the same actual amount of potassium as the electroaid powder, which has 11% potassium, but we feed much less quantity. The electroaid paste has 7.5% potassium, so in one tube, you're going to get 2.6 grams. In 2 tubes, you're going to get 5.2 grams. The big nemesis to horses with HYPP is alfalfa. It's only 2.5% potassium, but we're feeding 5 to 15 pounds a day of it, so we're looking at 50 to 170 grams of actual potassium per day. Now, I do work with people that get away with feeding alfalfa to horses with HYP and PP, and what they do is they feed small amounts more frequently, so we don't have this big bolus of potassium. But if your horse really suffers from severe HYPP symptoms, then you really need to get the alfalfa out of the diet. So if we go on a horse, let me get my pen here because we've had a great question. What's the upper level of potassium for horses with HYPP? And again, it's let's work it out at 1.1% of the total diet, and your horse should be eating about 2 to 2.5% of their body weight per day as their total diet. So let's go on 2% of their body weight is what they're eating in hay and grain per day. So let's say our horse is 1,100 pounds, and we times that by 2%, and we're looking at 22 pounds a day of food that they're going to eat. And so we don't want more than 1.1% of that to be potassium. So I'm going to do it in Google. 1.1% of 22 pounds in grams is 109 grams. So for an 1,100 pound horse, that you probably don't want them eating more than 110 total grams of potassium a day. So you can see how the alfalfa is really going to mess you up there. I get this one a lot, especially when people are concerned about keeping sugars and starches and grains out of the diet because they've got a horse that's got insulin resistance or metabolic syndrome. Why are there distillers grains in your products? And they focus on the grains. Distillers dried grains, otherwise you can see them abbreviated as DDG sometimes, are both a protein and an energy source. They originate from grains such as corn, wheat, or barley, but they're a byproduct of that distilling or ethanol production. So how do you make alcohol or ethanol? You take all the sugar and starch out of the grain and you turn that into alcohol or ethanol, and then we get what's left over, which is the protein and the fiber, and there's very little carbohydrate, sugars, and starches left over. So distillers grains are about 29% crude protein and about 10% fat. And they have B vitamins. So B vitamins make things taste good to horses. So they're actually going to be a very good carrier for mineral supplements because minerals don't actually taste that good. So we need to make them palatable, and we don't want them to sift out because let's say calcium is heavier than selenium, and we want to make sure that it stays evenly mixed in the meal that we have. Because the other question I get, which I actually don't have it in this presentation, but is why do we not have more of our products in pelleted form? There are a few of our products that we have pelleted, like the Cool Gut, for example. And the reason why we pelleted that, the Dac Metabolic, is there are some ingredients in there that don't smell or taste that great. So if we can combine them together, it's going to be harder for the horse to taste them, smell them, and they're going to be more evenly distributed. But every time you process a product, it costs more money. So if we make them pellets, it's going to cost you more money. Do you really want to pay more money? So will it make my horse hot or hyper? Healthy horses feel good and have adequate energy for maintenance and health. None of the Dac products contain ingredients that can negatively affect the horse's behavior, like make them hot or hyper. Um, that's not to say that if your horse was near death and starvation and you fed it the Dac oil and the DDA and some good quality hay, it's not going to go crazy, because now it feels good. And when you bought it, it was running at, 50%. Or maybe a lot of horses that, I was asked a question the other day about nutrient deficiencies in horses and are they glaringly abundant? And I would say for the majority of horses, they're not glaringly abundant, but they are very common. So I have slightly less copper or slightly less zinc or slightly less selenium in my horse's diet than they need. And how do I know? Well, your horse's kind of their health and their mood and their behavior is all running at 80%. Well, you just think that's normal. You think he's calm and sedate. But then you start feeding them more food and you realize that, um, you know, they're not hot because of what you fed them. They're feeling good. This first bullet point, I should have changed this. Absolutely, we have a product for metabolic syndrome, Cushing's, and insulin resistance. That is the Dac Metabolic. But that answer right there, working on the research, that's always going to be there before we have the science to back up the ingredients we're going to utilize. So up until we came out with the Dac Metabolic, we're working on the research. We're making sure. I could replace that for, do we have a product that's going to supply CBD to your horse? No, not right now. We are working on evaluating the research, evaluating appropriate suppliers, to make sure that the quality is there. I guarantee you that the majority of products on the market right now, if you tested them for the actual CBD content, they are not going to match what's written on that tag. And I will not do that with a Dac product. Anhydrosis, non-sweater, no, there's really no consistent evidence or efficient drugs available to treat that, other than moving to a cooler climate and feed through fly control. Now, I know that there are a lot of companies doing that. It's something that we discuss on and off. As of now, it's not on the table, but it may be in the future. Can my horse overdose on any of the supplements? Of course, the horse can overdose on any of the supplements. If they get in and eat a whole bucket of the SE and vitamin E, then, selenium's pretty dangerous if you feed way too much of it. I also caution you before, like, recommending a lot of off-label, off-direction use. But, there are supplements like the Dac Digestive Feed Additive. If your horse eats a whole bucket of it, then they're probably just going to get a bit of loose manure and be fine. If you think they ate too much, always contact us, because you just never know what else they might have also eaten and would it be compounded with what they ate of ours. But my horse won't eat it. What can I do? Banana flavoring, stevia powder, these enhance flavor. Make sure when you're adding the supplements, if you already have a picky eater, gradually add them. Mix it in really well. Use water or oil to stick it all together. Is hay testing a good idea? Absolutely. It's the foundation of your horse's diet, and small deficiencies in hay can result in large deficiencies in your total diet, because really you feed 1 ounce of a Dac supplement and you feed 25 pounds of hay. It's really important to test your hay. Is the soybean in the Dac bloom safe? In my personal opinion, all the science that I have read is that there is no negative effects of soy or any soy-based products on horses, or people for that matter, but we're talking about horses. So yes, it's 100% safe. If you feed vitamins and minerals, won't the horse build an immunity to them? This was a really weird question. No, every day your horse has the same requirement for vitamins and minerals, and it only changes based on their physiological activity. Did they get pregnant? Are they doing more exercise? Or, the day your horse doesn't have a requirement for vitamins and minerals is the day that it dies. So yes, it continues to need vitamins and minerals. Is Dac all natural? There are some artificial flavor components used, but other than these, all the ingredients are from natural origin. And with that, I know we're getting really close to 9 o'clock. I want to open it to any questions. The black screen's really boring, so I'll just get back to this one. Thank you, everybody, for listening in.